Patric, no discussion about women's health investments can be complete without hearing the voice of the entrepreneur. And so I'm very glad to introduce Patric Stenberg, the CEO of the Swedish biotech company Gesynta Pharma. Patric holds a PhD in pharmaceutics from Uppsala University in Sweden. He has more than 20 years of experience as a CEO, chief scientific officer, and in different operational and R&D roles within the life science industry, from small companies to large global corporations like Wyeth, today Pfizer. Patric, you co-founded Gesynta in 2017 and then led the company through their Series A financing round in 2018 and the recent Series B financing earlier this year, in which you raised $30 million for the company. So welcome, Patric.
Thank you.
Can you tell us in a few words what it is Gesynta does? I guess that's a question you've been asked a lot of times in your fundraising.
Yeah. And I always try to be brief in doing so. so Gesynta Pharma, in short, we're a small pharma company, and we're developing anti-inflammatory drugs. And these are based on a drug target that was actually discovered very closely here at Karolinska Institute, and two of our co-founders are actually the professors that discovered this target. So this is the ethos of the company, I would say. I think more importantly for this discussion, we have a very strong focus today, which is in endometriosis. And our frontrunner candidate, 𝗣𝗶𝘁𝗰 is now ready to enter phase 2 as a non-hormonal treatment of endometriosis. So that's where we are spending all our efforts these days, actually, and this is also the majority of the proceeds from the fundraising we just completed.
Thanks. Yeah, and maybe before going back to the endometriosis story, which is the focus of the company today, in our discussion earlier, it was interesting to learn that the company originally was focused on an orphan disease, systemic sclerosis. So you come from this biology pathway perspective, and one of the indications where this pathway plays a role was in a subset of patients with systemic sclerosis. And then you already were looking into endometriosis, but you fully focused the company on endometriosis then a couple of years after getting started. So endometriosis is, of course, a much larger indication, affecting more than 200 million worldwide. This also became the basis for your Series B fundraising. So one would think this should be an easy discussion, right? Moving from a small indication to a large indication, or what were the discussions you had internally?
So first I'd like to say that coincidentally, I mean, just following up from 𝗪𝗍 here, coincidentally, systemic sclerosis is also a disease which disproportionately affects women. The vast majority, about 2/3 of the patients, are actually women. But that's of course a coincidence in this case. So we started here very much guided by the biology. We knew from the start that inhibition of the drug target mpgs1, it's called, will result not only in an anti-inflammatory action, but will also result in a vasoprotective action through formation of mediators that protect the blood vessels. And so it was quite logical that we would proceed on both tracks to see which one works better. And so to that end, we set up a very exploratory, but still a phase 2 study in systemic sclerosis to study the vascular blood flow in these patients. And it turned out that the drug worked very well. Drug target was completely inhibited. Patients were not experiencing any side effects except from placebo. However, pharmacologically, we were not able to affect the blood flow significantly in this patient population. So it was a very easy decision for us to pivot over to endometriosis, given that we had also at the same time, roughly in 2022, achieved very good preclinical data supporting a disease-modifying effect of 𝗣𝗶𝘁𝗰 in endometriosis. So that was an easy decision from a biological standpoint. Now we also ask about patient numbers and what were the discussions following this, and that was pretty tough, actually. Again, the orphan ethos is pretty important for many investors as well as for ourselves. So having the orphan drug designation was was a clear advantage from a regulatory and practical standpoint, and it also held some promise that Gesynta could actually, so to speak, go all the way and potentially actually be part of marketing this drug one day, perhaps.
And that's, of course, because yeah, these orphan diseases, they have much smaller patient populations, so the regulatory path is much shorter. You need to spend less money, fewer patients in the studies, etc.
Yeah, correct. And the other thing here was, of course, in the phase 2 study, we were measuring vascular blood flow, which is something people like to see, as compared to endometriosis, where pain is the overarching most important endpoint. It's a very subjective endpoint, obviously, and susceptible to more difficulties in getting precise measurements and more sensitive to circumstances. So that was another aspect, and obviously starting off as a primarily orphan drug company, it was this was not what everybody invested in. So we had to have that discussion, and by the end of the day, everybody was happy, and we went into endometriosis. I'm very glad we did. But it wasn't an easy decision.
And so what was the fundraising like? You recently closed your Series B financing. When you reached out to new investors joining your company, what was their reaction when you told them that you're focused on endometriosis?
So yeah, so we had been raising something like 26 billion, I think, before. So we had quite a long history, and we had done quite a few clinical trials with 𝗣𝗶𝘁𝗄 before this round. So one thing that was very good for us was that we had a wealth of safety and pharmacological information supporting 𝗣𝗶𝘁𝗄 here, which of course is extremely important going into a disease like endometriosis. But I think the reaction from the VCs and other investors that we reached out to was actually mostly positive, I would say. I mean, it was a challenge that pain was the main endpoint, and I have to be very honest and say that some passed on the opportunity just because it was perceived to be a difficult program ahead. But I think we had good momentum with all the societal attention around endometriosis that started only a few years ago. So getting to the table was never a problem for us. So I don't think that was the big issue. But I think also it's important to stress that there are no free lunches because we're doing something which has a great medical need. It is still quite harshly evaluated based on the risks associated with large phase 3 trials, the pain endpoint we discussed, the regulatory situation where we need to show pain. So I think that was something that definitely came into play. Of course, we were successful initially, ultimately, but it wasn't a quick journey. I mean, we had to work pretty hard, and we had to leverage any introductions and other help from people like 𝗪𝗪 to actually get introduction to the top-notch VCs that ultimately decided to invest here.
Yeah. So you mentioned regarding endometriosis, maybe women's health more broadly, the clinical development, the regulatory side. One other thing that VC investors think about when they first make an investment, they already think about the so-called exit. So what's going to happen down the line? Is there an IPO? Is there a trade sale to a larger company? And one concern that has been sometimes raised with women's health is there are not that many potential acquirers in the women's health space. So how do you deal with that question or concern?
Yeah, I think first of all, we have a pretty good pretty good investment case, in a sense that we are raising the funds to actually do a combined proof of concept and dose finding phase 2 study, meaning that, I mean, it's a very well recognized inflection point. So it's typically a point where value is perceived to increase a lot, and pharma companies starts getting interested because they have seen some clinical efficacy. I think to that end, there are very few if any, available companies within endometriosis with an asset at that stage. So no, there are not that many potential takers, but also there are pretty much no potential acquirees, actually. So I think the market would still be in our favor, albeit smaller.
Mm-hmm. Great. I think we'll soon move on to the panel discussion, but maybe one last question for you. Any pieces of advice sort of from your now 2 successful fundraisings that you would share with other entrepreneurs, maybe specifically in women's health?
Yeah, I think I was about to actually give some of the examples that 𝗪𝗁 just gave. So that's I guess that's the disadvantage of going last, right? But I think so I will not reiterate them, but maybe provide some aspects of this. And I think planning the entire financing trajectory ahead is immensely helpful, so that you know a priori what you're aiming for. And I'll just
meaning sort of matching the amount of capital that you're raising to the specific clinical, non-clinical.
Yeah, not just the financial part. I mean, 𝗪𝗁 talked about the sort of the know-how that comes with the money. I mean, we're looking for money that will bring us something more.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very easy when you're starting your new company, right? You basically you grab everything that's on the table because you want to get going with your actual work, right? But I think it is very well time spent thinking about what kind of investors you would like to see around the table. And from a financial point of view, I would say spending the extra time getting the VCs in your early rounds, getting the VCs that can attract more money in upcoming rounds, I think is cannot be overstated, actually. I think that's immensely important. And I think to that end, I think persistence is probably the best word to describe what is needed. Don't settle for just the first thing you see, but be persistent. Make sure that you set your company up for future rounds, because no matter what you think about exits, there will be future rounds, right? You might want to exit this a year later, but you need to plan for future rounds.
So finding a Series A investor who can come back into the Series B and
attract. I would say be well reputable enough to attract others to join the Series B, because there will be more people around the table in Series B inevitably.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Patric.